Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new Microtech standard issue, or MSI. I'm going to try and refrain from referring to this as the Microtech MSI because that is redundant, but I can't promise that it won't happen. Thanks so much to the gentleman who loaned this knife to me for review. It will go back to him when I am done. I do not get to keep this. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. I don't know when you guys are watching this. I'll try and have it uploaded fairly, quickly. But the reason I'm saying that is because I don't know if these are readily available yet. This one came from the Microtech Gear website, which is a place that you should definitely check periodically if you're trying to get your hands on this. But I've noticed that they are going to hit various retailers, so I'll try and link some places down below. You'll just need to check and see. I am also planning on eventually picking one of these up. Spoiler alert, I do like it that much. But it might be a little bit difficult to get for a while. I'm hoping that availability becomes better. I think Microtech kind of knows what they have here, which is a blessing and a curse, and we'll talk about that. But I'm hoping that they plan to manufacture a lot of these because these are sure to be increasingly popular. I was speaking with the owner of this knife, and he has already done a full takedown with pictures. So I'm going to show that to you guys here. It's just going to be silent images. You guys can pause and take a look and zoom in if you want to, and then we'll talk about that. But here are some pictures of what the knife looks like fully disassembled, and some close-ups on specific parts. So I'm going to go ahead and do a measurement of this knife. We'll go ahead and do what we usually do here. Overall length of the Microtech MSI is it's bigger than I think some people might have initially imagined. It's very close to 9 inches overall. It doesn't look like it because of the curvature here of the whatever the camera, the perspective, I guess. But it is all of 8.85 inches. The blade length is coming in at my measurement 3.85 inches, and your cutting edge is coming in at just shy of 3.5, thanks to a pretty large forward choil area. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. Yeah, I did not realize the MSI was this big. I have been carrying this knife. The owner said, yeah, go ahead and carry it. It's going to be a user. So I've had this in the pocket for about a week, on and off with some other knives. But I did not realize how big this thing was. I was also surprised to find out how easy it was to carry because of the profile. But yeah, you can see it is absolutely bigger than the Ontario Rat Model 1. Let's put it up against the Demco AD 20.5. There we go. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. There we go. And then last but not least, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bug Out. All right. How's the action? That's what everybody wants to know about, right? So the action is very good. You can see, if you looked at those pictures of the disassembly, the bearings have they're kind of staggered, right? There's quite a few of them, though. The action is super smooth. It's very drop shutty as soon as you pull those two little switches back here. You can do the reverse flick. The reverse flick works fine. It's not quite as satisfying as on some other knives, right? I mean, the reverse flick on a Spyderco knife is much more satisfying, and it's just because there's not a lot here holding the blade in place, as is the case with, this is different from an Axis lock, but other locks that are similar, right? I just didn't have that super, kind of there's tension building up against the middle finger as you reverse flick it, and then you get this very satisfactory sort of breakaway, or you're overcoming that and launching the blade into place. It's almost like it starts to come out and you're like, oh, so you at the last second you try to put more force in your finger there, and it just doesn't work. Wheeling it out like this, yeah, that works just fine. Honestly, flicking out with your thumb is probably the most satisfactory way to deploy it. You can absolutely reverse flick it. I think the best way to do it is just to get as low as possible, and you're almost in my experience, I'm almost always using some wrist. It would have been nice. I mean, it's not like a knife needs to be reverse flickable in order for it to be considered a good knife. But you know that with that hole being there, that's what you want to do, right? But it's fine. It works. It's just I wish the tension was that there was just a little bit more down here, right? Disengagement of the lock, man, this lock is ridiculously solid. There is a little bit of stick, and I would venture to guess, just looking at how those surfaces contact each other, I bet most people are going to experience some lock stick. This was very sticky when it got to me, and you know, like I said, or like you guys saw, the owner disassembled it, put it back together, maybe in an attempt to make that stick a little bit better. I've probably deployed this thing 700 or 800 times, and the lock stick is definitely working itself out. I'm sure it will completely work itself out over time. If you get one of these and the lock is a little bit sticky, you don't have a problem unless you need to use a tool to pry this lock loose. I hear people complaining about this all the time as if it's like the end of the world. No, my gosh, my knife is inoperable because the lock is a little sticky. You don't have a problem unless you have to use a tool to disengage the lock, right? This right here, this is where it's at now. It was way worse. It was probably 5 times worse than that initially. Not nearly as bad now. Don't freak out and send your knife back if the lock is a little sticky. If you're having to pull so hard that it's hurting your fingers, right, then maybe okay. But if it's just a little sticky, like, don't freak out about that. It'll go away. These buttons here are very Microtech-y in the sense that they're kind of like almost needlessly aggressive. It's not that bad. I'm not like, oh, you know, somebody get me a coffin. I'm going to pass away. No, it's not that bad, but you know, I feel like it's like, why did you make them so aggressive? You know, because in the field, tactical work with gloves. Bleh. Well, the vast majority of people, and this is true, right? I mean, I know we all like to pretend, right? But the vast majority of people who buy these knives are going to do what I did with it, which is just put it in my pocket and use it like a regular pocket knife, right? We're not gonna go out and tactical the tactical with the tactical on the tactical. That's not what we're gonna do, right? It's how it's marketed, but that's not what we're actually doing with these things. These could probably be knocked down just a little bit, but they're not bad. And honestly, just the joy of how everything works. I mean, the disengagement of this feels substantially more secure, and then the engagement of the lock feels way more secure. It just feels way more robust, not just because it's a coil spring and not an omega spring. Just the whole thing feels more robust, right? The tension feels nice and dialed in, right? I just wish it's this area down here. That's what I want, there to be more tension there. But yeah, the action is very good. It's very fun to play with. The weight of everything, right? The weight and mass of the blade and the fall shuttiness and all of that. It's very good. Okay, carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. Not as thick as you might think, right? It's honestly about the same. There's a slight bit of contouring here, which is really nice. Length and height up against the PM2 and the Para 3. You can see here, this guy's gonna be a larger guy in the pocket, but considering how big it actually is, it's impressively compact. I mean, we are really looking at no more size overall than the Spyderco PM2. I think it's a little bit heavier than the standard version of the PM2, but it's really, for as much knife as you're carrying, it really, in its folded form, it's really not that big, right? Definitely bigger than the Para 3. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness. I for some reason, am very surprised that the blade isn't thicker. Then again, Microtech's not like, you know, exclusively about thick blades. The blade stock thickness on this it's still coming in fairly thick at, it says 158, probably 160 thousandths, right? So fairly thick, not monstrously thick, but fairly thick. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I think that pivot is a T20. Yep, that's just magnificent. Why more companies don't use massive fasteners for folding knives? Why you guys don't, some OEMs and designers and everybody, Why they don't use much larger fasteners for the pivot is beyond me. I don't know. This is a good idea because they are way less likely to strip. Way less likely. Which is the most annoying thing. When you strip it, you're just, great. Now that's going to be way harder every single time I adjust it, right? Or impossible, right? It ruins it. Yeah, this is great, the T20. And then I think the rest of these are T10, which is also amazing. That's just like the best thing that you could do, right? No, I'm wrong. I'm dumb. It's a T8, but it's still great. As long as it's not smaller than T8. T8 is, in my opinion, this, you guys know this, is the smallest that any fastener should ever be on a knife, right? You got quite a few, and as you saw from the picture, it's like, there's a lot of parts in this thing. There's like way more than you would imagine, right? So, taking this thing apart and putting it back together, anybody who's taken apart an axis lock knife with Omega Springs, or if you've taken apart the Manix 2, you're probably looking at a similar situation. I mean, I don't think that I need to demonstrate that to drive that point home. It's not going to be like taking apart a simple pillow or sandwich construction liner lock or frame lock. Those are very simple to take apart. This is going to require you holding things in place, pulling back and adjusting and this or that. I do like that they used a D-shaped pivot barrel, and the solidity of the construction is very, very good. The way that they made the parts and the choices of parts is very, very good. But it has a lot of parts, right? So if you're gonna take this thing apart, it's not impossible. It's far from impossible, right? But it's gonna be a frustrating experience for some people. But it will definitely go back together, and you don't have to worry about accidentally breaking an Omega spring in the process, because they are not present, which is a big deal on this knife. Okay, we need to weigh it. That's something we definitely need to do. What are we looking at for materials here? M390 MK. Listen, you should go read Laren Thomas's write-up of this, right? I could sit here and fumble around that, but Microtech asked Bowler to tweak M390 a little bit for him, which they did. The end result, Laren Thomas, go read his article on it. That would be the way to go. I think that will give you a far better understanding of what we're looking at. It's essentially just M390 with a top hat. That's the way that I describe it, right? So that's how I'm going to treat it in the review. But it's an interesting story how they came about doing that, but that's about it. So M390 MK for the blade. And we have G10, which, by the way, this will come in various colors of G10, and they also will surely do one in carbon fiber. And I really hope they do one in aluminum. I think that would be great. Maybe even titanium if we're lucky. And then we have steel cartridge liners, which initially I was kind of bummed out about. I was like, why didn't they do like a full steel liner? Number one, probably to save weight. They're not saving money with not doing the full inset steel liner. Probably a little bit of weight, better balance, right? And honestly, the G10 is thick enough, robust enough that I don't know that it really would have added any additional structural integrity, right? Yeah, so there you go. So the weight on this, I'm going to guess this weighs 4.75 ounces. Where are we at? Oh, 5.19 ounces. So it is a little bit on the heavy side versus like the Ritter Hogue. It's a little more than half an ounce more than the Ritter Hogue, right? So it's a big knife. Doesn't have perfect ratios. But it's not like oh my gosh, it's so unbelievably heavy. How am I ever going to carry this? Not even close, right? It's a little over 5 ounces, right? Balance is right there, right behind the pivot, which is why it feels lighter than, it actually, to me, it feels lighter than 5.2 ounces or whatever. So I never weigh these before I carry them because I don't want to judge them for that. I just want to carry it and just have the experience and not base it off of, whatever it weighs. So yeah, I was kind of surprised that it weighs 5.2 ounces. Yeah, it really carries lighter than that and feels lighter than that as well. Okay, let's move into the meat and potatoes here. This is a good looking knife. It's a very Microtech looking knife. But it's good looking. I'm really happy to see that Microtech is willing to create some manual stuff that, people have been asking for something like this for a long time. Mainly, I think, in the stitch. And they're like, yeah, we're going to do that too, right? This surprises me that that Microtech wanted to do this. And what surprises me further, we don't need to get to the end of the review to talk about this. Honestly, what surprises me further is the price tag. Currently, the price on this sits at $250, which is great. I have zero faith whatsoever that Microtech will keep it at $250. Maybe they will, but I just don't. I mean, and I know people are going to get mad at me like, don't say that, because I don't think Microtech is sitting around waiting to hear what I think about this before they adjust the price. I don't think that that's a reality that's not just, it's just not occurring. Right? I'm just using, common sense and logic based on what I've witnessed in the past, right? With not just Microtech, but other companies. I don't think there's any chance at all that this stays at $250. But if it does, that would be great, because this is wonderful at $250. This is, by the way, a US Microtech product. Microtech collaborated with Reich for 2 models, being the Annex, the current Annex, the production Annex, which is not the old custom Annex that was made in the United States, and the SOCOM Bravo, which is not the SOCOM Elite. It is a different model. For some reason, people assumed that Microtech was moving all of production to China because of that. I just don't understand how people jump to that. It's a silly way to exist, to just automatically assume that that's how that. They're just that Microtech's moving production to China because of these 2 models, right? No, that's not true. You should feel shame if you were one of those people. That shame it should be upon you, right? And learn from that. Don't jump to conclusions. This is it's so preachy. This is made in the United States, which is very cool. Right? Microtech does make a premium product. They have some of the most impressive USA manufacturing. They have the ability to do that. They're a large facility. It shows. The fit and finish on this, the overall quality of execution is incredible. This is very, very good. So, seeing it, I know people are like, just J10 and M39. They can't help but just reduce it to materials because that's all their little brains can process, right? That's materials. There's a bunch of other stuff to consider there, but I guess, if you want to aggressively ignore it to help it make sense for you, right, then, yeah. $250 for what this is, where it's made, how it's executed, to me is amazing. It really is. But I have very little faith that it will stay that way. The ergonomics on this knife are good. There are some disappointing areas. This right here, it gets thin and it's very angular. I honestly don't know why they did this heavy scallop here. And I know people are going to say, well, it's access to the hole. Okay. You could have not made this heavy scallop and just done the continuous, sort of contouring here. And you still would have had plenty of access to the hull. It makes this area thin. And so with this area being thin, when it is, it's like they scalloped it and then they just, right here, they just didn't round it off, right? It's a sharp angle. So while it's not like, I can't, it's not like that. It just makes it less comfortable than it would have been had they just kind of left it alone or just been less aggressive here, right? So it's okay. And it really didn't bother me that much. Choked up, I think it's plenty comfortable, but again, we're dealing with some areas right here that are just a little bit sharp and a little bit angular, right? It's not bad, and I'm really happy that we have this choke up position. It makes this knife incredibly roomy. You have plenty of options. Choked all the way back, sort of your standard grip area. You can kind of choke up, right? If you're have commitment issues, right? Or you can choke up completely. And the jimping on the spine, while it's it's not super aggressive, it's not quite like Les George jimping where it's just there to look at. It doesn't grab your fingers the way that like a Spyderco PM2 jimping would, right? Like this. It does work. And it complements the choil area very, very well. Ergonomically, this is good. The pocket clip bill is ridiculous. I don't, Microtech, it's almost like they were like, how can we design the most absurd clip that's just like, it works, but it's, what I want to do here is dump so much tactical into the clip that it just becomes completely and totally unreasonable, right? Intentionally, right? It's just, it's unforgiving and unapologetic, but designed purposefully to be that way. We do not need the tactical dip in the clip, right? I understand people are like, well, when you're tacticaling the tactical, when you're approaching the tactical, right? Then you need the tactical dip in it because it can be jostled. The knife can be jostled during the tactical. We don't need this. We don't need this. It drives me nuts with the Microtech. Just don't do that, right? And what we also don't need is the pew, woo, right? The crazy ski jump bill. Unbelievably unnecessary, right? It's actually more unnecessary than even the insane billboarding that we have on the clip, which I actually am okay with because they didn't put it on the blade. I love that, right? They just put it on the pocket clip, which is just insane. The clip isn't that bad. It works in and out of the pocket. Honestly, it's fine. There's just too much of a bill. This goes right into your palm, right? That's the most uncomfortable part of the knife is this just bleh, crazy. And then this dip thing, which just makes it, it's just got two things to overcome in and out of the pocket every time. It's dumb. I doubt they're going to stop doing it. It doesn't matter how much I complain or anybody else, they're going to keep doing it because tactical. I know I'm stirring people up. Oh, I want to comment and tell that guy what I think, but that's what he wants me to do. And I am, after all, tactical, and I see through your strategy, metal complex. Yeah, this is unnecessary, and I don't much like it. The clip is, let me get my angle square here. The clip is steel. The backspacer, to my knowledge, is titanium. And then this filler tab is steel. I know people complain about filler tabs. I don't care. That doesn't bother me. What is much more important, I think, is the fact that the pocket clip is ambidextrous, or the entire knife is ambidextrous, right? So you can mount the clip on this side. I mean, and here's the thing. Not many people like this exist, but my brother is one of these people. He is right-handed, but he insists on carrying his knife in his left-hand pocket. I don't know why. That's just how he is, right? And he has an 80 20.5, right? And so that works because it's an ambidextrous knife. So the reason I'm telling you this is beneficial for whoever you are, right? If you're a weirdo like my brother who doesn't know how to carry a knife, I'm going to send this video to him. If you're a weirdo and you don't know how to carry your knife properly, based on which hand is dominant, then it's fine. You don't have to pay attention. You can just flip the clip over and you can carry it however you want. Or if you're left-handed, which is going to be more often the case, with people switching the clip over. But the lock is ambidextrous. And that's just another beautiful thing about this knife, right? It's beautiful in that way. Very cool, very accommodating, right? So yeah, you can flip the pocket clip over. The quality of the G10 is fantastic, and I think this is a great example of why, people who base value off of materials alone are just ding dongs. The G10 here is super, super nice. It is G10, but it is machined in a way that is absolutely, completely, and totally superior, right, to something like this. Micron, I love this knife, right? The Micron, it's a great value, but this is a flat, simple piece of peel applied texture G10. It's just a nothing sandwich, right? So you guys can tell I watch Penguin. I watch Charlie a lot. It's the stuff he says is coming out of my content. The G10 looks fantastic. Every little detail here. I mean, even how they bowl this in for the screws, or it's just great how they lip up around the area for the filler tab. It just makes it look a lot nicer, right? How they sort of are carved way back here to accommodate for this jimping, right? or just how they meet up with the backspacer. It all looks nice. There's not an area of this knife where there's nothing going on. Everything looks good, but it's not too much, right? Which Microtech can sometimes go overboard with, right? They definitely can do a little bit too much here and there, but this is nothing about this is too much, right? It's nice. The blade is amazing. This is, it reminds me of like the Python blade. It's sheep's footy, right? Here come the blade shaped police, whatever. The blade works. It's fantastic. And while it's not the thinnest thing in the entire world, it will slice and it will cut, and it is robust. There's plenty of material because of the way that the nose of the blade comes down. You're much less likely to snap the tip. I mean, if you snap the tip, take it from somebody who's done that. You're doing something stupid. It's plain and simple, right? You're doing something you probably shouldn't be doing with the knife. I understand, sometimes accidents happen, but that's usually the case. But the blade is wonderful. It's kind of hard to get your finger all the way up here since it is a longer blade, but you can. Absolutely. This thing slices, cuts. It just works great. This is a great EDC style blade, and it can definitely handle a lot more. I mean, that's the thing. This is a really durable knife. This is a knife that is designed to work in a number of different environments. And I know people will be like, well, it's bearings, so I can't tactical the tactical because bearings. The bearings will be fine. I mean, unless you are like working in like an environment where there's like lots of like metal powder or sand, which is, if that's that's not a common thing. So if you're those types of people, then maybe not, right? But for everybody else, a little bit of dirt, a little bit of grime, that's not going to stop this knife. You can blow it out with compressed air and you should be fine, right? But it is a very durable knife, absolutely. Just the way that it all comes together, got some heavy stick off of that one there. I think every now and then it still gets stuck. But as you can see, it's not doing exactly the same thing anymore. But anyways, yeah, extremely durable, and the blade geometry is also great. The M390 is not going to be, the toughest composition in the world, but the geometry of the blade will make it a little bit tougher than if it were, like an M390 open L blade. There's a flat that carries out about 85% the length. There's a nice swedge up here. This has been tumbled, which I think looks fantastic. I'm sure that they will make an all black one. I believe they already make a bronze one, which is really, really cool. I think I'll probably hold out for that. And then, the Signature Series versions of this, which will inevitably come down the pipeline, will have various super cool finishes that you can pay, $200 more for if you want to. This standard finish looks really, really great. The final cutting edge is great. Everything is awesome. I have no complaints there. It uses a coil spring and not Omega springs. This is better, period. Omega springs are fine. They are a little, prone to breaking versus other locking systems. But this just removes that from the equation. And I'm sure that people will find a way to complain, well, lint can get in there and stuff can block. Lint and stuff can get in any knife. Maybe they should have closed this off. I think maybe that would have been a good idea, not to actually mitigate the likeliness of failure occurring with the lock, but just to keep the, the people from being like, but it could, right? I mean, it would redirect them to complain about something else, right? No, I'm not really all that concerned with anything getting. I mean, if we're going to complain about that, where are all the complaints about the Manix 2, right? They don't exist, or if they do, it's very minimal, right? I'm not concerned with that. I think that that's a rare scenario where the lock would not work, and in that case, you would again just blow it out with compressed air, and that would probably fix the problem. A coil spring is a better system than Omega springs because the coil spring is much more durable. The way that tension is applied to it, and the general shape of it is just going to outlast an Omega spring system in every scenario. It's just better, right? It's probably still something you should, lubricate, oil up periodically, but the coil spring system is definitely just better. It works better. And it's, unless it goes flying into the abyss while you're disassembling the knife or reassembling the knife, it's just not something you're going to have to worry about replacing, right? The piece that contacts it, you can see right here, this lip. This is where this enormous chunk of steel just attaches there. It's the whole thing. It's not a bar. It's just the entire thing. So I think the reason that so many people are going to experience lock stick like in this one is because of the total amount of surface contact and the geometry between those two surfaces. It's just going to occur until they work themselves out. Do I think lockup solidity will lessen as it works that out? No, I don't. Microtech is not a company who is known for creating knives that experience lock failure. It's not common anyway. So no, and honestly, the solidity of this lock is ridiculous. It is so unbelievably solid. Not a hint of play in any direction. It is crazy solid, and that is undoubtedly by design. They definitely went overkill there and said, well, if it sticks, whatever, right? I'm sure it'll get better over time, right? Which they would be correct about. There's a lanyard hole of course, because lanyards are tactical. We already talked about the clip. We already talked about really the general aesthetics of everything. It looks, it all looks really good. There's a huge stop pin right here, a stop barrel, and there's a little bit of shouldering on the back of the blade. Looks great. Like I said, no lock stick in any direction, up, down, left, or right. It doesn't matter if you just barely, like if I just just goop, nothing. It locks up solid no matter what. No pivot lash, very smooth action, and then kind of a light. This area down here is a little bit light. We already talked about that, but it's still you can shake it out definitely. But unless you're tacticaling so hard, right? This is the only scenario I can realistically see. If it's like you are just so tactical and you are just sprinting to wherever, then maybe, right? But most of the time, no. No more than any other axis lock, right? Yeah. Some disappointing ergonomic areas, but outside of that, it's really good. It's going to be too big for some people, definitely. I think they would be smart to make a smaller version, but I like the big version, right? So the smaller version would just be more accommodating for people who don't like bigger knives or who legally cannot carry bigger knives. I think that'd be fine. But who knows if they'll do that. Price tag is amazing, especially for Microtech, which is why I just don't believe that it'll stay that way. But if you can get one of these for $250, yeah, definitely. This is an awesome knife. It makes for a great EDC knife, and while it's a little bit overkill, it's nowhere near as overkill to the average person, versus the other stuff that they put out. I think that this is a fantastic American-made knife, and I think it's one of the best USA-made knives on the market right now, all things considered. The way that they have made this it's incredibly durable. It's going to be extremely reliable long-term. It's made out of excellent materials. It's fully ambidextrous, right? It's very easy to manipulate. This is an absolute home run. This is a wonderful knife. I think just a couple of things would make it perfect, but if I was going to give this a grade, I'd give it like a 97%. It's really, really good. I love this. And I'm honestly shocked that they didn't have the thing priced at $300 or more. But I'm a huge fan. I really, really like this knife. All right, this was a super long review, but I had a lot to say, So anyways, I'm going to put this in my recommended knives playlist, and it's also going to go in my favorite knives of all time playlist, because it really is. This is one of my favorite knives ever. It's really cool. Thanks again to the gentleman who loaned this to me. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that I either do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.